Hi everyone, welcome to our live panel discussion today, talking everything about ICPs, ideal customer profiles. My name's Rachel, I run marketing here at ChartMogul, and I am joined by three of the best when it comes to ICPs, as far as I'm concerned, because the discussions we've been having behind the scenes have already been really, really great. I'm joined by Tom, Madhav, and Ingrid, who are here to help answer some of these sticky questions we have around ideal customer profiles, how to build them, how to actually use them, and some of the concerns I think or issues that can happen along the way. So without much ado, we're going to get straight into it. But I'm going to start by getting everyone to introduce themselves. So Tom, could you kick us off?
Sure, yeah. Hi, so I'm Tom. I'm the CEO of Geckoboard, and we make real-time dashboard software. And we've been on a real journey with ICPs this last 2 years. I think they've become like the number one company buzzword. I don't go more than an hour without someone saying ICP. So they've really stuck and been hitting them hard recently.
Amazing. Great. Hi everybody, I'm Madhav. I run all marketing at a company called Storylane. It's a demo automation platform. I've been with early stage startups for almost about 12 years. Done a lot of ICP research, right from pre-revenue to like post-revenue. It's a lot of interesting ranting that might happen today.
Cool. And finally, I'm Ingrid with Ox VC. We're an early growth stage B2B software investor based in London and Stockholm. We invest in, or I should say our ICP is software companies that have proven out product market fit and are on the way to emerging go-to-market fit, or basically predictable growth. My own background prior to Ox was as a VP marketing and growth, so I have lived the journey of getting the joy of defining it firsthand and the trials and tribulations as well. So really looking forward to the panel.
Awesome. Thank you all for those intros. And I should mention that, yes, you're right. You are seeing an airport behind Ingrid. That's not an AI background or anything like that. Ingrid is on the road and has been really gracious to still join the panel, even though she's sort of in between. So thank you, Ingrid, again. And yeah, we'll see what time any departures, if they're delayed or anything in the background. So, I'm really excited about this conversation because I think as a marketing leader, we often sort of get stuck in our own worlds, thinking that things like ICPs are sort of only for marketing, and a pure marketing concept. But the reality of that is that they're really not, especially when they're done right. And so I'm really happy to have Tom here, especially on the panel as a CEO himself, who's really hands-on and involved in ICP. We've got Madhav, who's got the marketing perspective as well, plus a lot of experience with advising startups. And then obviously Ingrid bringing that investor perspective, but also obviously having actually done the work as well in the past. So I think we've got some really different perspectives that could be interesting. But I am going to start with you, Tom, because I think it's important that we start sort of with the basics. So the golden question from my perspective is sort of in 1 minute, how did you define your ICP? You said it's been a big process and a big buzzword in the company. So what did that look like, that process?
That's a big question. So I think we've always had a good idea over who our different customers are. We have regular customer calls. We look at our data. We have a sense over who they are. But the ideal part kicked in really when we realized, well, wow, there's quite a lot of different people here. And there are problems caused by that, and maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. So what we then did really was started looking at, well, who are the best? Like, who are the customers that we really want more of? And a lot of that was looking at things like our retention data, our customer usage data, but a lot of it was also gut. Like, I think when you're talking to some customers, you get a sense that, well, these guys are really happy. We're nailing this. Like, there's no alternative to us. That we really are the best. And that kind of instinctive sense there as well over like, okay, yeah, we've got all these customers. Some of them are even paying us similar amounts, but these ones are the ones that are retaining and are happiest, and also where strategically we think we can go further. And so for us, it was all really about narrowing. Like, we knew who it was, but like, which of the ones do we really want to focus on? Because we probably had a dozen different customer profiles, but it's like, which is the right one? And then also like how strict to be with that definition, because I think, again, you can define it but is that the right shape for your company, or do you need to be more specific? And there we've had various runs at it, and really it's been for us a story of starting with something and then getting stricter and stricter over time.
Yeah, interesting. Especially, as you said, starting off with having so many different types of users for your product, which can be seen as quite a broad product, right? So
yeah.
I imagine that was quite challenging. So let's fast forward a little bit. You've gone the process of finding those sort of top 12 sort of profiles and said, okay, which ones can actually make us the most money in the long term and are going to be the best customers for us. How do you actually implement that, especially when you have already a base of customers? You're not starting at zero. So what did that look like?
I think it was sharing the problems that not focusing and not defining it with the organization was a big thing. So, and that's kind of where we got to this, right? We started on our journey actually by looking at our churn. Like, churn's a problem. And then when you look at that, you're like, oh, wow, like churn's totally governed by the kind of people that are coming in and whether they're the good fit, really. And then we had a choice there over, well, do we try and get more of our customer profiles to be ideal, or do we focus in more on the ideal ones and narrow it that way? And we actually started by trying to make more of our customer profiles ideal rather than go strict and actually go, no, we're going to narrow in on the ones that are really successful. And I think we had a big learning curve. Like, I think for a while we thought we had the ability to be able to hit this broad set of people, and actually just time and time again we're like, well, actually, like, wow, the alternative companies that we see that maybe only focus in on a small set are doing the kind of things that I want to be doing, but we can't do that because we're going too broad, we're too diluted. And I think particularly like with that where we are, where a huge amount of engineering effort is required to build really deep integrations and different data sources, we thought for a while, oh, we can do it. If we just get better at doing that, we'll be able to get broader and broader. And you can't. You really have to narrow it down, and that's the journey we went on. But it's also shifted over time for us as well. I think if you ask me who our ICP was 5 years ago, I'd have said it was much more companies like us, and now it's shifted. Actually, it's moved more towards kind of operational teams, support teams, sales teams.
Yeah. That's really interesting as well, talking about the shift. I think we'll come back to that one. I should mention, if you've joined the audience here, we have a couple of polls live, and you can jump in and vote on what you think about ICPs there. Tom, you mentioned, the engineering work that goes into actually, once you've decided on who your ICP is going to be, that's not just a marketing exercise, update the website headline and you're good to go, right? You jumped straight in and said, hey, there's a lot of engineering work here. I'm interested, Ingrid, Madhav, you've also gone through the process of implementing and refining ICPs. What's involved in actually implementing? Again, it's not just the website, right? But what else is involved in it? Oh, muted, sorry.
I was trying to be really good and mute while I'm in the airport here. So, I mean, in a way, it's like ICP is cross-functional. So it's like any other cross-functional initiative, right? Like, if you haven't announced it in all hands or you haven't debated in the management team, it's probably not going to stick across the company. And it's like, okay, so how do you then after implement it? Well, you probably need to actually walk around with each team and figure out how could you use this? What are your current frameworks? How can you integrate it? But like, you've probably succeeded at the point that if you see like one employee challenging another that maybe we should prioritize differently because this isn't our ICP, then you've kind of got it. So that's probably the marker of like, it feels like it's quite there, so to speak. But one thing actually, just to fall back on what Tom, you were saying, I think it's really interesting too with this sort of question about churn, because at some point, if you have some customers that really aren't ICP, it can be okay to let them go at some point. Like, you just raise prices on them and you see how many are going to stick around. And then you know that. But like, it's sort of once it's a small enough part of your ARR. So it usually will come like maybe 6 months, a year after that sort of initial focus period, which is just something that I sort of, your comment made me think of as something that can also be part of implementation as well, but that we don't think about as much.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think it's a really common question that people have is when you're sort of crossing off sections or segments of your customer base who are no longer ICP, what actually happens with them. And I agree that's part of the implementation process. And it's actually really good to think about implementation as not just a 2-week thing. We did a workshop, we have a discussion, we're good to go. But actually the implementation is the work of making it happen, including letting go of perhaps some of those customers. Madhav, how does that look like for you guys at Storylane?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, obviously at like the earlier stage startups, it was always like, when you're sort of defining and sort of once you've defined your ICPs and start implementing, it's just about 100% agree with Ingrid, right? It's a lot about alignment, major issues like if your product and customer success and the founders and marketers all have different answers for the actual ICP, it sort of is quite a mess at that point, right? But I think we're sort of at a place right now where we had this one ICP and we really grew there. And so we're at that sort of a phase where we're looking at expanding our ICPs as sort of like the next phase of growth. You're sort of like sort of reach like a ceiling with like existing ICPs. And yeah, that's where we are at, right? And I think one interesting thing that I've just been thinking a lot around is like, I think when we sort of think about ICPs, perhaps you can maybe also think of it like there are like these primary ICPs which you built the product for. And then there are like these secondary ICPs which sort of you didn't really anticipate you were building, for them, but they sort of actually did, turn out to be. And then what happens is that these secondary ICPs start coming up in calls. And, when what we've sort of noticed, like, you're sort of looking for patterns and trends, right? And sometimes there's one sort of a secondary ICP. In our case right now, it's sort of like SEO teams. And so, we're starting to see that emerge a lot more. And so now it's sort of making that shift from secondary to, primary ICP. So right now we're sort of at that place and just a whole lot of expanding of the ICPs at this point.
Yeah, great. Yeah, the work doesn't stop. Tom,
I was going to come back in on the whole kind of getting the whole company aligned behind it. So I think we had probably 2 failed efforts in our history over the last 5-10 years as well, where once we basically went for it in marketing and didn't anywhere else, and once where we went for it in product and didn't really do it anywhere else. And I think both were abject failures. Like we were doing the ICPs were actually probably the same as what we've now defined and are fully rallied around, but when marketing did it on their own, that failed, and when product did it on their own, that failed. And so this time it's been really baked into everything. So we've changed the metrics we track, we've changed who we prioritize and support, we've changed our product roadmap, changed our pricing to kind of changing our pricing, reorientating, we're changing our positioning, like everything. And I think you need that. And it has stuck this time as well. I think it's been very kind of visceral and obvious. And I think people have got very good early feedback. Like the support team love it because we're saying, look, prioritize time on the ICPs. Don't talk to the customers that want something that's really obscure that we're never going to be able and kind of give them a crap experience. Like put your effort into the ones that are going to delight. I think because everyone's had that and it's so obvious that people like doing a good job. I think they like feeling like you're making something ace for a narrow set of people. They don't really like kind of doing something a bit mediocre for a broad set. I think that got early enthusiasm from the rest of the organization as well. But it cannot be a marketing thing. It cannot just be a product thing. It has to be the whole org thing. And it's basically, I mean, you could kind of summarize our whole strategy really as being focusing on the ICP at the moment and shifting who that is a little bit.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like there's this great moment that happens where for me, for example, as a marketer, you walk into the room where product works or where engineering works, and they've got the same ICP language on the wall or in their work, right? And that's when you can really feel that the whole company, the whole team is really focusing and collaborating on the same thing. And I agree, Tom, that's a really good feeling. It feels good to be all on the same team, trying to build and sell and market and support the same sort of customer, right? And so when we think about implementation, I think it's so important to underline there that it's not just about the marketing team, but it actually goes throughout the entire company. And not only is that good for growth and focus, like what you were saying, Tom, but it's great as a sort of camaraderie coming together, right? We do have a question on the development of ICPs before we get too far ahead from the audience. It's a really interesting question, actually, probably one that a few of us will be jealous of. They're asking, hey, what if I'm in a company which has pretty much no churn? Where things are looking pretty good. We've got an ICP sorted. So yeah, Ingrid, this might be someone for you to check later on, but we've got an ICP sorted and that ICP is doing really great. Not much churn to worry about, but we need to grow and we want to develop more ICPs or at least, more market or whatever it is. What should I do? Anyone want to jump in on that one?
I'd say that I think one reason this can be confusing is like the basic, how do you figure out your ICP advice is like, you look through your customer data and you see which customers expand more or churn more. But obviously if nobody churns, then how do you know who likes you the best? So I think you can still like figure out who's the better fit customer. It's just you need to look at a different data source. So I probably, in that case, I go to either the product data to see if usage is very different in sort of different portions of the product. Like, does your product limit to tell you that some features are used way more by certain customers and you maybe even be underpricing those features? You should sort of break them out. Okay, that could be somewhere. The other place to sometimes look too would be in your sales data to see like, do some customers convert faster or have shorter sales cycle lengths? Because then still, even if you don't have churn, there's still sort of a reason to go after those customers with marketing and sales because you should have better unit economics on them over time. So those would sort of be like my two. I'll try looking at that data sources A and B instead.
Yeah, I love the idea of looking at what features perhaps they're using and seeing if you can monetize that a little bit better. What about expanding your ICP? Tom, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to add that I think I would double check that you haven't saturated that first, because I think expanding comes with a lot of costs. But I think then you could be looking at, well, your conversion data, like who is it that's not converting, and maybe look there. But also I think for people like us, I won't go to the exact definition of ICPs, but we've got some that are kind of linked to the tools that people use, and you could go to adjacent tools. So, if you're targeting support leaders who use Zendesk, and you can look at Freshdesk or something else like that and go broad like that. But I think it's also knowing where you think you could go and having a sense of where you're already strong and are there obvious adjacent places. And I think that's a kind of strategic vision-y type thing as much as anything.
I think one thing too that not knowing the whole context of the questions asked is that, for example, if you have like multi-year contracts, so you have a very enterprise customer base, then it is quite normal to not have churn. Well, obviously you can't have churn if like the contracts are continuing. So you have to go and talk to the customers. Like you have to go beyond the data to sort of figure out and use the quality, like in true enterprise, you have to use the qualitative signals to figure out who do you hypothesize values this more, and therefore who similar types of companies would be out there.
Yeah. And Madhav, what about, that expanding process that you've gone through? So how has that looked at Storylane, especially I think in sort of these changing market conditions? We've had a question from the audience around, the kind of insanity that's happened in SaaS for the last sort of 4 years. We do a lot of reporting on that in ChartMogul and can tell you, yes, things are changing quite quickly. How do you react to that when you think about your ICP as well? Does the market sort of shift who your ICP is?
So I don't think it shifted. What I think when we just for context, so we sell to sales, marketing, and pre-sales sort of across the GTM org, but we actually started in marketing. Like that was what we were sort of good at, right? And so one of the dynamics that, sort of like the market dynamics and how it sort of also affected our ICP was just like, how do we build a moat around our product, in the organization, right? And one of the best ways to, was to expand across different teams. So that's when, we took that whole route of like expanding in the GTM org. How could we sort of reach the other sort of audiences? And then I think there was another sort of thing around like, how do we sort of expand the size of our enterprise deals, right? And I think that's when we were sort of looking at all of these different ICPs and what they were sort of perhaps like coming in, like some sort of a pattern, right? Like, and we saw a lot of like solutions engineers sort of coming in with like a very sort of similar request. They were trying to sort of use the product in a different way, right? So that's what sort of allowed us to be like, okay, this is one potential area that we could expand on. There was like a larger account size, right? And if I could give you like a current scenario, right, we're sort of at a place where, okay, the enterprise contracts are growing. There's like a whole PLG motion that happens right now, which has been relatively slow. And then we saw that there was like this huge market within SEO. So like, perhaps one sort of ICP where it's just like you can sort of reach a wider audience and make the PLG motion work, right? And that's sort of allowed us to like, okay, maybe this is one direction that we could go in, tried it out for about a year and sort of started positioning towards that. So ours is a slightly unique scenario in the sense that we're now in this place of like expanding ICPs. We started with one, but now we're like multiple, which is never like the perfect place to start. You should never start with multiple ICPs.
And so just to jump on that, because I think that's a really common question people have is, how many ICPs is too many ICPs? When you have multiple ICPs, when do they stop becoming ideal? Is there a rule? Is it okay to layer on? You've talked about primary and secondary and sort of developing. Madhav, you're a couple of years into this process already, right? So how many ICPs would you say you have today? I can say for ChartMogul, we have 3. They're all sort of cousins of one another, but we do have 3. Madhav, what's your number?
3. Yeah, I think the magical number is 3. Yeah. Yeah, there's 3 for us.
Tom, do you have multiple?
It's a bit complicated. So I think we've got 2 core ones, but then we have slight flex in the rules. So for instance, there's one that fits firmographically and everything, but there's a technical thing that means that we don't class it as like a strict ICP, but we will treat them in a similar way from a support point of view to others, because we would like to do that, but we're not going to put the engineering bandwidth behind it yet because of weird kind of internal technical problems that would require that. So it's a bit fuzzy, and actually it's not the definition is different, but we have a slight different strictness of what that means for different teams.
Mm-hmm.
I would say we've got 2 proper ones at the moment.
Yeah, makes sense.
I mean, I think in a way, if you give me one ICP, we can probably dig deeper to more criteria, and suddenly it's 2 ICPs. So I think it's a bit of a trick question, right? Yeah. Like but I think there's something to your answers that like we cannot comprehend more than 2 or 3. So like just stop at that level of definition, because the team cannot, like, it just doesn't work from an organizational complexity point of view. You can't create 5 different types of slide decks for every single type of ICP that might land in your sales funnel, right? So you have to limit. The thing that it does make me think of though too is that I think the rule doesn't hold, like if you are going through and like right now finding product market fit, don't do 3. Like at that moment that you are just figuring out like this is my perfect fit with a perfect customer, stick to 1, narrow down. You can always add the later on, but that moment in a company's history is about proving that like you can get one small team all working together to do the same thing. And so any distractions away from the main mission, even if it like makes sense, you can probably still go after those other ICPs like in 6 months, a year, 2 years.
It's a great point. You sort of need critical internal infrastructure to be able to run multiple, right? And I liked your comment, Ingrid. I saw Madhav smile as well around, how many ICPs can you actually sort of comprehend at one point? How many ICPs can you hold in the company at once? And there certainly is a limit to that, because as we mentioned, having an ICP isn't just we have a slide deck and we all know the nicknames, but it's also, we're using that to decide how we do our work and what work we do. And so, magic rule of 3 with humans, we're fairly simple in that sense, aren't we? There are a few more questions around this topic though, so let's stay here a while longer. One person was asking about the decision criteria to add more ICPs, and Ingrid, I really like what you just mentioned about when a company is at that product market fit stage, just start with 1. Let's just really focus in on proving that we've got a great solution for this one type of customer. What are some signals that might suggest it's time to add a second, or you're ready to add a second? And anyone can jump in on this.
I mean, I can maybe jump in. I think it's maybe, there are like some sort of milestone events that might happen. I think it's like either something like you're either sort of looking to sort of grow in the sense like you have a revenue goal, right? And you're sort of looking to, like, you don't see that path with the existing ICP and you want to sort of expand, right? That's one. Sometimes you might be sort of going through a repositioning or like a positioning expansion, right? That is when you would sort of also expand your ICPs, right? It's also all sort of growth related, I would say. I think it's usually, I would say at those times, like even for us, right, it was mostly around that time where, all right, okay, you get to 5, and then you get to 10, and then like, would the existing sort of ICPs be able to get us to 15 or 20 million? So I think that's probably one way to think about it, I would say.
Another that I would think of too is when you feel that we've reached sort of like 90% of best product in this particular category, and we have resources to actually go after another one while still being able to, like, I don't know, defend our sort of like moat that we have here. Because the biggest risk, right, is that you sort of add, but every time you add, you are actually not adding like time right then, but you have future you need to continue serving. And I think that's the mark of sort of, you need to be super honest with how much can my organization handle in a year or 2 years. And that I start thinking there from product and engineering, but it actually holds true for the other teams as well.
Yeah.
That makes especially sense, I think, around making sure you've got the resourcing to be able to support that and bring that in. Maybe to get even one layer deeper in terms of just very practical, we're being asked to give some examples of our ICPs, just because I think that would help people really understand what we're talking about. And I think, that's typical ICP talk, isn't it? It's easy to talk about the concepts, but the reality is maybe a little different. I can start because similar to what Ingrid was saying about, being really clear on who you're starting with, and then making sure you've got resourcing. Our ICPs are very similar. And, I would recommend this approach for a lot of startups, especially as you're scaling. So when we market to one ICP, it's not so far for us to then, market to another. And the same thing goes for building. So an example of an ICP at ChartMogul are early stage B2B SaaS companies on the journey to $1 million in annual revenue. And so for us, that would be one sort of ICP. Madhav, do you mind sharing one of yours?
Yeah, 100%. So we primarily look at ICPs more from a job role perspective. In another world, we could have one ICP which sort of takes one problem. And there's another world where we sort of live in right now, which is job role specific. So we're sort of targeting marketers, sales, and pre-sales. And within that, we have like definitions. So like within marketers, it's product marketing managers, it's demand gen folks, it's growth marketers, right? And within pre-sales, it's solutions engineers, like very specific about these. And then obviously like sort of relevant in certain organization sizes. So we look at mid-market and enterprise specifically.
Makes sense. Okay, so those are 2 examples, probably on pretty much opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of how we're approaching ICPs. So, ours at ChartMogul are more general and very much focused on the company and the size and stage. Madhav's is much more specific, focused on the individual user. And I think that's probably a lot to do with the differences in our products, right? Tom, do you want to be the...
Maybe we're in between, I don't know. So we're sales team leaders who use HubSpot or Salesforce. They're in certain geographies, of certain company size, and they're particularly wanting to create real-time dashboards or dashboards they look at throughout the day. And we also factor in the job to be done. Now, that's kind of like the main enshrined version of it. But then we look at it slightly differently from our customers, because we obviously don't always have all that information being PLG. So sometimes we're inferring it based on what they're doing in the product, and then backing it up by doing kind of calls and research and stuff. But that's one of them. And there's another similar-ish one for support team leads.
Great. You did slot perfectly in the middle there, I'd say, Tom. So thank you for that. I wanted to. Oh, bit of playback there. I wanted to ask about a little bit more actually about PLG style companies and how they develop ICPs. Because Tom, you just mentioned, there's more data that you have access to other than demographics and, feedback from sales and success and retention metrics, but there's also product usage metrics and conversion metrics that we can look at. Perhaps you or Ingrid, whoever wants to jump in, what can we learn from PLG about identifying the right ICP? What can we pull from that?
I think the way I've thought about this sort of historically is that sometimes the advice of like focus that was created in a world where actually SaaS was really only mid-market or enterprise. And PLG can feel super deceiving because you can't really control who swipes a credit card on your website, right? Like, are you going to kick them out? So I think that's why it can seem at first that there's a discrepancy between like needing an ICP and I'm a PLG company. In some ways, like, yeah, you accept that you're probably like anyone can sign up for your product, but you just also accept that they might churn out if it turns out they're not the right user. And so that's the point where like just having that additional layer of data means you can cycle through those insights faster. But I think the two things that become even more important, right, is that marketing is less about like which leads are we going after, but how can we be really opinionated on the website? How can we actually say, this is who I'm for and this is who I'm not for? And then people can decide for themselves. But like theoretically, that should raise conversion rates, right, on the sort of ICP users. So you still need an ICP. It's just you're probably going to use slightly different advice than given to most SaaS companies about how do you use that to improve your unit economics, which is kind of the point of it at the end of the day. Would you agree?
Yes.
Bit of drama there, Ingrid.
I'll find on mute.
I'll maybe add just another point to it. So what we've also seen that actually worked well for us is, so we have a PLG product and an SLG, and within the PLG, there's sort of like a pre-step for a PLG, which is when we sort of put the sort of an interactive demo on the website. And what we've usually seen is that it's sort of a way to sort of self-qualify for the visitor. So anybody that sort of goes through the demo, the pre-step of the PLG to eventually sort of signing up for a PLG sign up is sort of like getting filtered into like, okay, this is the ICP that's going to probably pay for the credit card. So that's another sort of way to maybe pre-qualify, maybe, get some data onto like what could be your ICP for just from a PLG perspective.
And I guess most PLG companies, right, you're trying to grow organic inbound, but at the same time, the marketing team will be using paid. So it's still worth it to know who is worth paying more for, that it's okay to have higher CACs here because I actually know that they will expand over time.
Yep. Definitely. I think so. We're very much PLG. Our ASP is about $200 per month. So but we provide a very high touch customer support experience. Like we're first response is sub 20 minutes for everyone. Like we get amazing CSAT. We try really hard there, but yeah, just the scaling of that. But I think that for us, a lot of our acquisition is via SEO and word of mouth, and particularly SEO actually. And you're not always in direct control of that. You can get a bit of bycatch in terms of you're ranking for stuff, and that's good. You're ranking for it, but you're not turning people away, and so you are bringing in people that. And I think for us, like we've got a lot of people that are coming in, they're having a good experience, but they're just not. It's just not where we want to go. Like we can't elevate ourselves from where we are as much, and so we're okay with that, and we're still providing a good experience, still providing a good product for them, but it's not where the direction is and where we're really trying to push and invest in our engineering effort. But I think it's definitely harder when you're not doing as big gated deals and as a full enterprise sales process where you can really be really strict. We do have a little bit people coming in who aren't super ideal. One rung down.
And you do see tactical kind of things on, for example, sign up forms or even purchase forms sometimes, where there's sort of a drop down of, who are you or what's your company? And there's often, a ABC or other. And I feel like that's like one way that more PLG companies try to sort of signal, hey, maybe you're not going to be a focus here. I'm not sure how much psychologically that really impacts things, because to your point, Ingrid, if someone wants to swipe their credit card, please come on in, right? But at the same time, there are little things that you can test. Wonder if they're very successful, but worth mentioning. I do want to sort of change tone a little bit now and ask about red flags. It's the time of the panel where we talk about red flags. So we've talked a lot about how to develop your ICP, how to layer on additional ICPs, and sort of what ICPs looks like for each of us. How do we know, what are those red flags that suggest that we might not have the right ICP, that we might have some problems? Tom, I might pick on you because you're the one who kicked us off about going through this process, and you said you had 2 failures along the way. Were those failures we had the wrong ICP, or were those implementation failures?
They were lack of full kind of mobilization behind the strategy failures. I would say that we had the right idea, but we didn't go for it properly. I think that, so I mentioned in our kind of pre-chat, one of the red flags we had was, and one of the things I used when I was presenting this to the company was, we had a customer write in and say, hey, what happened to you? Did you get bought by private equity and fire engineering team? Because as far as I can tell, the product hasn't got better in the last year. And like, wow. And I replied, I phoned them up and had a chat, and it was much kinder on the phone. But I think the reality was he wasn't an ICP, and the product, we hadn't done any product effort to fix some things that he wanted fixing. And I think that was a real good moment, because we don't want that. Like, we obviously want to support them, but that's not how we're going to be 10 times bigger than we are today, like if we've got people like that. So that was a really good, not honestly great, but it was a really good story to be able to tell. And then another one was that we had an ICP customer I was just chatting to, or he'd been a previous customer, he'd moved, and he was looking to bring us to his new job. And he was just saying, guys, like, what's wrong with your pricing? It's freaking out my boss because you're like too cheap. And again, you're like, wow, like, because he's a super ICP, and you're like, something's gone wrong there if we're not thinking about that. And then I think other times where, support maybe filing some requests or feature requests, and that we're not going to do it, and there's time and energy going into that, and other people, engineers in the company are reading these conversations and thinking about things we might be able to do to fix it. We don't want to do that. And if we're treating all feedback the same, then everyone's doing all sorts of weird stuff, and you need to be able to. So those kind of things. But I also, on my slide, I think I put a little picture of that Stretch Armstrong toy from like the 80s and 90s, where you got like rubber toy being pulled in different directions. It was just your ability to be able to move fast enough, because we've been pulled everywhere. And then maybe the final one was just having engaged a bit more with some of our partners, looking at the people that only focus on them and what they were able to do compared to what we were doing, being quite broad horizontal. It was just, oh God, we can't compete with that if we're doing what we're doing. So those are all a lot of the things that popped up over the last couple of years. Was like, we need to do something about this.
The warning signs. Gosh, I can really feel it though, that the image of the stretch toy. I don't know how many of you, I'm sure everyone here has been in conversations, particularly with product, competing on, should we build this feature or this feature? This feature will make 5 enterprise customers the happiest they've ever been, and this feature will help 100 early stage startups be happy. Where do you go, right? And honestly, I think that's an ICP question, probably. Madhav, Ingrid, what red flags have you identified, had you seen in the past, that might suggest the ICP isn't quite right?
I mean, I get to do this with this is from the investor point of view, right? So not the internal, but I get to have the X-ray vision in. So the most obvious red flag is usually if you speak to a CEO and you get an ICP definition, and then you continue because the company's super interesting, and you speak to the VP revenue, and then it's actually not the same answer. And then you speak to the VP product and it's actually not the same answer. And I'm like, ooh, okay, what to do now, right? Or, you get sent an Excel file with some customer data and stuff, and you see that, oh, how that's defined here is not what discrepancies is essentially the flags. So where are the discrepancies? Obviously, companies can prep for fundraising and make sure we're all going to say the exact same thing, right? But that's not the point of my what I'm saying. It's more, do you genuinely think that you'll go around and, like, if you were to ask each management team member in the company tomorrow what the ICP is, would you get the same answer?
Yeah. I mean, I 100% agree with Ingrid. That was also something I would say, right? Like, I mean, for sure, like the alignment is probably the biggest thing with the ICPs, at least even for us and all my past experiences. But I will also add another thing just because I want to, which is around, I would say, I think sometimes it might just be a mistake to be too narrowed down with your ICP, in the sense like you're just saying no to everything, or like, no, this is not an ICP. No. I think it's always good to keep your ears open, in the sense of, again, like I keep coming back to like looking for those potential expansion opportunities, right? Potential sort of patterns that might be sort of coming and throwing at you, but you're sort of just blocking out that noise. So I think that might also, I don't know if that's a red flag, but I think maybe what sort of thinking about.
But I think to your point on the coming back to our conversation, like how many can you handle? Like 3. In reality, they all exist in a continuum, don't they? Like there is one ideal company that is the perfect customer. Absolutely. But that's like, that's that impossible company to reach. Every single company will have something that's off. So it's more of a continuum, and we just try to bucket it together. And you're arguing like, don't go so specific on the buckets that they become almost unusable. Make sure that they're still useful internally. If I understood what you were saying, right?
100%. Yeah. You just, better eloquently put it, I guess. Yeah.
No, I just started from your raw material, really, and then tried to rephrase it. It was your idea.
So one of the things we did as well as part of this was we basically had a purge of all the old documents we had with different definitions, because we probably had like 3 or 4 generations or different departments versions of customer ideal, I don't know what we called them at the time, but personas or that kind of stuff. And like when we were doing this, we're going through some other changes as well in terms of how we did process, and we implemented Notion, we nuked our old wiki, we purged a lot of the old Google Docs things, and it's like, this is now the canonical definition. Like, don't go finding something from the Google Drive from 5 years ago and then start ad-libbing with that. And I think that helps too.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's not on the locked Notion doc or the view only Google Drive, then it's not legit anymore, isn't it? Everyone, this has been great. I feel like now I want to talk about, implementation in terms of how do you actually, make sure that your ICP isn't too specific, that you can identify who they are, to Ingrid's point about it being a bit of a spectrum. I still have many more questions, especially when we think about competitors and, how to adjust ICPs there. But unfortunately, the sun is rising here in New Zealand, where I am, which signals that we are about at time for our panel today. But if you are interested in these topics and would like to discuss them more, certainly feel free to add these folks on LinkedIn if you haven't already. I'm sure that each of them would be very happy to have a chat or talk about some of these things in more detail. I know, Ingrid, you've got a blog post, right, about ICPs, and I think that's probably worth taking a look at as well. We will be sending this recording to everyone who's registered, and in that we can link in some other useful content on the topic. But for now, we're going to have to end it there. Thank you to everyone for your questions, your poll answers. It's always more fun getting questions from the audience. And today I think we might have hit a record. So I feel like we might have to come back to this topic again pretty soon. Ingrid, Madhav, Tom, thank you so much for being here and answering all these questions and sharing your thoughts. I really appreciate it, especially with all the time zones we're juggling here. A big success, I think, at the end. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your week and see you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.